thought I'd do a simple beginner's landscape painting today. So I've got three colours in my palette. I've got a light red, an ultramarine blue and a gamboge yellow. First thing I'm going to do is squirt into each of these wells about half a teaspoon of water. I'm going to do three colours. Light red, that was about a pea-sized blob. Ultramarine blue, so again about a pea-sized blob. I'm going to take some of the light red into that, and what I'm looking for is a grey. You get a nice purpley grey, so I'm going to take a bit more blue in because it's gone a bit red. That's looking good there. I'll give my brush a little bit of a rinse. Just need a little bit more of the ultramarine blue. I'm going to pop about a pea-sized blob of that into that last well. So I've got three colours there. Move these to the side. I'm going to come on with some water. We're going to start with a sky. I'll pop a couple of little hills in this one as well. So you want to make sure you get plenty of water on there, that you're covering the whole area of that sky. And then the brush I'm using is a round number 10. And we're going to come in, push down. I've popped some of the ultramarine blue on the brush and I'm doing a circular motion. This helps you control the paint, makes it look cloud-like in the sky. Leave a little bit of light there at the bottom. Rinsing my brush out and then just drying it off a little bit. I'm going to dip into the light red. I'm just going to pop a little bit of that just at the bottom, so we're getting a little bit of a glow. You can mix it in with the ultramarine blue. We've got that mix coming now anyway. That's going to be quite grey, so it does work nicely to mix in. Rinse my brush off, dry it off again, and I'm going to dab into the purpley grey mix that I've made. And this is the light red and ultramarine blue. It's a lovely colour. Works really nicely for dramatic skies. And I'm just dabbing in a little circular motion. I don't want too much in there. I don't want to eliminate what I've got. If I'm coming down further down, I can dab a little bit off onto kitchen towel and do some little wisps in here. That always looks quite nice. And if you want littler wispy bits, just dab a little bit off the brush before you come on, and it'll take a little bit off. And then you can come in and less will flow out of the brush. You can get a few little stormy clouds as well happening. Okay, I'm going to dry that off. Okay, so that's nicely dry now and it's settled really nicely, and it's a good point for me to pull out to say that actually when you use a pre-mixed grey, you often don't get this split out of colour. And you've got the settling of the ultramarine blue and the light red becoming apparent. So because we've made that mix, you get a much better split of colour applied there. So that's often why I make mixers rather than relying on the pre-mix. The pre-mix is easy, but it doesn't always have the best effect. So what I'm going to do now is pop in a couple of little hills. I'm going to just bring in a bit of water. So I'm coming over the sky. This is with my round number 10 now, because this is a small area, so I don't need to pop huge amounts of water on there. I'm going to drop down to a number 6, and I'm going to bring in some of the grey. So when you're doing distant hills, the best thing you can do to keep them in the distance is to use the sky colours. So this is a round number 6, I'm popping on some of the grey, it's flowing through. I've got that sky colour behind as well, which is working quite nicely. Just rinse that off, and then I'm going to pop on a little bit of the blue as well. So it's just giving it a variety of tone and a mix in there. You're getting that sense of distance starting to happen. And dry that off. It's dry now, and I'm going to pop one behind it. So we're going to make that look even more distant by fading the colour. So if I pop a hill in here, this is just a little bit of water with my round number 6. I'm going to come in with the blue first this time. Again, we're still coming over the sky. And just by leaving it blue and lighter, you can already see that it's fading away. It's looking more like the sky. I'm going to be very careful how much grey I take onto this one. Take a little bit, I'm just dabbing in. We can leave that just to settle. I don't need to dry that section off. So then if I come further down, I'm swapping back to my round number 10. And I'm going to pop a field in here. So this is just water going on, and then I'm going to come in with the blue. So it's still those same 3 colours, and in fact we've not used one of the colours yet. I'm going to start to use it in a minute. So I'm going to make this so we've got a little bit of a path coming through this field. The water and the green gone on. I'm going to rinse my brush out. I'm going to load my brush up with water, and I'm going to lightly dab into the yellow. Now I'm using Gamboge yellow, but you can use any yellow you've got. The same with the blue, the same with the red. They will all work with the same principle. It's about experimenting with the paints that you've got. So what I'm doing now is I'm adding the yellow, and that's making a green on the paper, but I'm keeping that green more towards the front, and then I'm blending it slightly as we go towards the back. So you're getting that sense of distance. And in fact, if I swap down to a number 6, smaller brush puts me in a bit more control. I can come in with a little bit of the grey. So that's that same sky grey, and just use a little bit to create a bit of shadow. Onto this wet surface. And then I'm going to dab my number 6 brush into the yellow, so this is neat paint, and into the blue neat paint. Just mix them together so that I get a green. And then I can come in, this has got no water on the brush. I'm going to create a little bit of a shrub just at this corner. Dab into the yellow, dab into, so these are the neat paints, dab into the blue, and you're going to make a bit of green. And then because this is still wet, it's going to give a nice soft feel that we can work into later, just to give us a little bit of detail. And it's bolding up that colour, and it's fresher at the front, more sky coloured at the back, and it's going to give you that sense of distance. If I rinse that brush off, dry it off, and just dab a little bit into the grey. I'm just going to pop a bit of grey towards the bottom of this, just to give a bit of shadow. You've got to make sure you dry your brush off though, because you're adding a lot of water otherwise. Okay, I'm going to go back to my round number 10, and I'll pop some water on. We're going to do this side. So dab into the blue again. When you mix on the paper, you get much more vibrancy than mixing in the palette, but I tend to do a bit of both. Make sure that this pathway isn't too smooth. You want it to have that sort of jaggedy edge. We're thinking rustic. Got that blue on, and rinse my brush, load it up with a bit of water, dab into the neat yellow. I'm going to come in to create our green. So starting at this bottom section in the foreground where it's nice and vibrant. So always apply the paint there, and then you can move backwards when you've got less paint on the brush, and it will get less vibrant towards the back. It's just little simple things like that that are helpful to know. Rinse that brush off, but drop down to my number 6, and then make sure that that's dry. Dab into that grey mix again. We're just going to create a little bit of shadow again. Horizontal strokes, just gives a nice surface feel. And then drying my brush off, dabbing into the green, dabbing into the blue, making sure that that's a nice mix of green. So they're both neat colours, the yellow and the blue, making a nice mix of green. And we're going to come in, and this side I'm going to put some grassy bits. Again, because it's neat paint on a dry brush, it shouldn't move too far. But because the wash is still wet, it will have a nice soft effect. So dabbing creates shrubbery, strokes upwards or downwards create grasses. If you want to vary that a little bit, just dab into a little bit more blue. So this is neat blue on a brush that's got a little bit of green on it still, and that's making a really nice, bold grassy effect. I'm going to dry that off. Okay, so that's nice and dry now, so we've got a little path to pop in here, a little bit of water with my round number 10, and I'm going to use the grey. And stroke that down. Then I'm going to use a little bit of the light red. So I'm going to swap to my number 6, and I'm doing horizontal strokes. So I want more red in at the front to warm it up, less towards the back. So I'm going to take a few little bits in, try and keep that horizontal stroke, so that gives it a sense of the surface being flat. Just filling in those little white bits. If you come over the edges, that's fine. In fact, you can come over the edges a little bit more, and that will start to net them together. I'm just pulling this through and give like a natural shadow. So this is just a little bit of the light red, just being netted through in places. Just let that settle a minute. What I'm going to show you now is how I'm going to pop some distant trees in. So I could have done this wet in wet when I was doing that mountain, but I've done it differently. And you can do this with the cotton papers. Now I'm using a cotton paper. So what I'm going to do now is very carefully wet over this mountain again. If I just wet the area that I want the trees to be, then I'll probably get a watermark. All the trees will run to that bit. But if I wet a whole area, then I won't get a watermark and the trees are safe within there. So what I'm going to do is take my round number 6, which is dry, and dab it into the green and dab it into the blue. Quite a lot of blue because I want these trees to be dark. And I'm going to just start dabbing into that wet paint. I want these to be fairly little because they're in the distance. And the trick with any sort of trees is to try and not get them so they're the same height. So you want some littler, some bigger. You want non-uniform with this shrubbery. Now sometimes what happens is you miss a bit of water. And I'm going to show you, because I've got a couple of bits here where I've missed bits of water, what I would do to rectify that. So I'm getting a round number 10, clean with a bit of water on, and I'm just going to touch the top of the paint, press down further than it needs to go. So I've missed a whole section there of water. I'm just going to soften that in. This one, I've got a little bit too much there, so I've dried my brush off. I'm just going to dab a little bit out. It's a strange shape. I'm not liking that, so I'm going to take it out. That's just with a clean damp brush. And then if I want to just cover that up, I can just pop in a little bit of grey. So that's the grey going back in. And in fact, whilst this is still a little bit damp, I could add some craggy bits as well. Some darker bits for shadow with the grey. That's helping give that sense of distance, because that's got a bit more detail. That's got no detail because it's further away. So all these little things help. A little bit of dark in there. Clean wet brush, just going to soften that bottom bit in because that's dried already. Okay, so that's giving that little bit of detail into that hillside mountain. We've got those nice trees happening there. Underneath you can have a little bit of shadow, so this is grey coming in. Just mirror what you can see above, and you can just pop some shadow underneath. It's always helpful to make something feel grounded. And then we can pop a little bit of shadow on the path. So this is the grey. This path has now dried whilst I've been doing that other bit, so I can just pop a few horizontal lines on. Then rinse my brush off, make sure it's loaded with water. I'm just going to randomly dab through that just to soften it in. I don't even want to soften in every single spot. I just want to give that soft effect. And then I'm going to dab into my yellow. I've got a little bit of water on my brush and into the blue to make that green. And I can build up these grasses. So this is now dry, so we're going to take some wet paint onto the dry. We've got that lovely base of grasses, and we can build over that to give it a little bit more detail. And then I'm going to dab a little bit more into the yellow, and I can do the same this side. So that was a stroke in action, this is now a dab in action. So I've got a lighter green and I'm just dabbing through. I'm going to pick up a little bit of the grey, just dab that through as well. And there you go. Just to reinforce the colours that I used here, so I used 3 colours, which was light red, ultramarine blue and gamboge yellow. Any of those can be used. You could use something like cadmium yellow if you didn't have a gamboge yellow. You could use something even redder. You could use cadmium red and that would still work in the same way. The light red and ultramarine blue made the grey, which is a purpley grey, and then the yellow and the blue made the green. So that's just with 3 colours. Hope you've enjoyed it. Bye.